Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
We have as Public Works. Are you guys ready? Also Black and Beach.
Yep, we're ready. Black and Beach?
Yeah, we are here. Good evening. Yes.
Good evening.
All right. Thank you. Good evening once again, honorable members of council, Mayor's Chief of Staff, Tanny Washington, City Council Chief of Staff, Dan Walker, department heads, and members of the public. We are here this evening for a presentation of Water Sewer Fund 6-year financial plan, as presented by Black and Beach and Public Works, who are Public Works consultants. I would like to first start by recognizing members of the Finance Committee, their attendance by doing a roll call. Vice Chair, Councilmember Michelle Harley, 4th District.
Present.
3rd District, Oliver, Xanthia Oliver. 8th District, Councilman Member Field.
Present.
At-large Councilmember Spadola. At-large Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
Council President Congo.
Here.
All right. I'd also like to recognize other council persons in attendance by doing a roll call. 1st District Councilmember Gray.
Present.
2nd District Councilmember Darby. 5th District Councilmember Fields.
Present.
6th District Councilmember McCoy.
Here.
At-large Councilmember Cabrera.
Present.
At-large Councilmember Dixon. All right. Would also like to recognize from Office of Management and Budget, we have Director Robert Greco here with us again, as well as we have George Hayford from OMB office as well. With us on the line, we have quite a few esteemed panelists. We have Public Works Commissioner Kelly Williams, who just heard from earlier this evening. Our Deputy Public Works Commissioner, Vince Carocha. Derek Akbar from Public Works Leadership. Christina O from Public Works. And from the Black and Beach Consultants, we have Prabha Kumar, Pam Lemoyne, Rupa Jah, and we have other panelists as well as the night goes on. With me in council chambers, council offices, we have Strategy Director Marshall Bassnight, and we also have the public. Before I turn over to Public Works Commissioner Williams for introduction of Black and Beach, I would like to inform everyone that public comments will be at the end of this department's budget hearings. We look forward to participation from the public. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. As always, if there's any follow-up questions, Ms. Marshall Bassnight will track and follow up on this request. I ask that my colleagues have any question, they can use the raise hand feature. And lastly, the Utility Citizens Advisory Board, which is UCAB. You'll hear that a lot. They distributed a letter on March 12th, so a little while ago, but they circulated a letter about the recommended sewer rates for fiscal year 22. This UCAB letter will be referenced a lot during this proceeding, and the advisory board is a nonpartisan board made up of citizens and leaders and no elected officials. And the point was this board was developed in order to give kind of an independent assessment of what our sewer rates could be. So that's what I want to clear that up. The Utility Citizens Advisory Board, UCAB, distributed that letter. If you do not have that letter, please email Ms. Bassnight so that she can circulate it to you this evening, because we will reference that often this evening. And without further ado, Commissioner Williams, I turn it over to you for introducing Black and Beach Consultants.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. I appreciate it. Members, council, members of the public, again, I appreciate your time for having us today to discuss the 6-year financial plan. This year, we're actually going to break it up, and we're going to tag team and talk about the financial plan as a team. I'm going to go ahead and start off talking about the plan. If you could bring it up, wonderful. Thank you so much. So to start off, we're going to talk about the why, the how, and the what. So as you know, the Water Sewer Fund is an enterprise fund, which is completely separate from the general fund. And the why portion of our discussion tonight is going to discuss why we have the need for utility resilience. The how section of this presentation today is going to be a pragmatic 6-year financial plan. The what portion of the discussion tonight is going to be the reliable service and the fiscal strength of our utility. So now I'm going to go over the why and the need for the utility resilience. Next slide, please. So just as a general overview, we provide an integrated water, sewer, and stormwater service. So on the water system side, we provide treatment and delivery. And then on the wastewater side, we provide collection and treatment of sanitary sewer, and we provide storage and management of the stormwater utility. Our core mission is public health and safety, resource protection and regulatory compliance, and a reliable system and system integrity, reliable service and system integrity. And they all come together, and that's our core mission. And basically what that means is water is life. Water is life for everyone. Next slide, please. Our community's resilience depend on our utilities. So without a vital utility, we won't have economic development, we won't have clean waterways, we won't have a public health and safety in our community, and we won't have a vibrant community. So really, the utility provides all four of these. All four of these areas depend on how healthy our water utility is. Next slide. This slide really demonstrates where we went, where we've been, where we are, and where we would like to be. So beginning in fiscal year 2005 to about fiscal year 2012, we really were in a spot where we were trying to recover financially. We did not have a 30-day O&M reserve. We did not meet our debt coverage ratio. We were financing all of our capital infrastructure. We were borrowing money from the general fund, really just to cover our expenses. So it took quite a while, and it took a lot of double-digit increases in our rates to get to a place that we are now. Right now, we are financially stable, and we are building our water sewer fund so that we can be stable. So at this point, we are at a place where we have a 60-day reserve. We're about 1.15% debt coverage, and we're about 85% debt financing. Where we'd like to be is the next phase, is in a place of long-term financial resiliency. We anticipate we'll be there in about fiscal 28. We're looking to have 128 days of O&M reserve, a 1.3 debt coverage ratio, and about 70% debt financing. or in other words, about 30% cash financing. Next slide. Why do we need financial adequacy? So we need infrastructure integrity. We need to manage our complex network of water, sewer, and stormwater system assets. We need to meet regulatory compliance. So there's Safe Drinking Water Act quality compliance issues. We have a combined sewer overflow mitigation requirements. We have stormwater permit compliance issues. We need to meet our 24/7 operations requirement. We need to maintain reliable service that requires 24/7, 365 operations. And lastly, we need to meet our emergency requirements. We need to be able to address emergency and unforeseen events, including events like a global pandemic. The point is to really protect our community's economic, environment, and the social health of Wilmington and beyond Wilmington. Next slide. So the utility system assets and capital program highlights, really there's three parts to it. There's the water, the wastewater, and the stormwater. Next slide. The Wilmington assets deliver 24/7 services. The assets deliver high quality water. Those assets are about $1.05 billion in assets. The assets that manage the sewer and stormwater, those add up to about $900 million. So timely infrastructure investments are a necessity. They're not a choice. Next slide. These are some pictures of the water capital investment priorities. So you'll see in the top right hand, that's an example of some small main replacements that we do. Large, and then going around clockwise, there's some large main replacements, pump station upgrades, valve, tanks, and reservoir upgrades. That the Rockford Tower is actually a working reservoir. You didn't know that. Then you have the source water improvements. That's a picture of us working on the Hoops Dam, which is an actual source of water that we use for our drinking water. And then on the top left is the water filter plant upgrades. That's our filter plant up there.
Oh, I have a quick question, Commissioner. Is this I understand that you graciously took the time out back in March to do small meetings with council. Is this a similar presentation, or is it expanded? I guess it's a more detailed presentation.
It is a more detailed presentation. So the individual groups that we did back in March were really the bones. This is a little bit more expanded, some pictures, some examples.
Okay, and
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure so that council members weren't confused, but like some may have already seen some of this, some of this stuff. So I just wanted to make sure, and that makes sense.
Yeah, so this is an expounded version, and it's funny you say that. The way I see it and the way the more you hear it, the presentation, the more you pick up on different things here and there. So, it may take 3 or 4 times for you to grasp the full capacity of what's going on. So this is the same presentation, just a little bit bigger with some more pictures and some more context, if you will.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Clarification.
Okay, next slide. So this slide really discusses what happens when you do a water main replacement. So when you do a water main replacement, it's actually one project, but it has multiple benefits. So not only do you get the main replaced, so you're replacing the old infrastructure, and like we discussed earlier in the budget discussion, our infrastructure, 46% of our infrastructure is 75 years or older. So you get the improved infrastructure, but you also get improved pressure, which means you can have better showers, but you get improved fire flow. You also get improved water quality, and there's a cost efficiency to it. Believe it or not, when you get a new water line, you also get new roads that come with it. And then when you partner up with people like DelDOT and Delmarva, there's a cost savings that come with that. So one water main replacement has multiple benefits. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about some wastewater priorities that we have. Minor sewer construction is pictured on the right. Some minor sewer improvements are going on the right-hand side. Pump station upgrades, RABF improvements, force main redundancy, and wastewater treatment plant upgrades. Those are our priorities for this year. Next slide. Stormwater capital investment priorities include the South Wilmington Wetland Project, green infrastructure, sewer separation, and urban forest management. Next slide. And similarly, South Wilmington Wetlands Project is another example of one project with multiple benefits. So that project has many benefits, including environmental. It eliminated brownfields. It included replanting of native flora and fauna. It's got economic benefits. The entire city and county benefited from the recreational and the development that's going around it. There's service enhancements, reducing the flooding in the neighboring communities, and the sewer separation project that's going to be happening soon is really going to benefit the residents in the local neighborhoods. Next slide. So now we're going to move on to how. And for that, I am going to introduce Pam Lemoyne from Black and Beach, and she is going to discuss the actual how we get to a resilient water fund or enterprise fund.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Before I start, though, I wanted to just pause here for any questions. I believe I think I saw a hand up.
Yes, Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you've covered this, but do you have a list or a priority list of sewage lines that are going to be replaced?
I'm sorry, the sewer
lines, sewage, the pipes that carry the sewage. Do you have any plan or priority of which ones are going to be replaced going forward?
Yeah, so we have some asset management systems that determine the age of the system. Basically, engineers put in a bunch of data and make a determination on the age of the infrastructure, the number of issues that have happened in a particular place, and they make a general calculation of particular areas that need to be addressed in general. I know that happens on the water side. On the sewer side, I'm not sure that asset management system has been put in place yet. I'll have to defer to Brian Lennon to ask him that question, but I will get back to you.
Okay, thank you. And if there is a priority list, I'd like to have it, please.
Okay, sure.
All right, thank you very much. And I believe now, Ms. Lemoyne, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. As Commissioner Williams said, now we're going to talk about the how of the planning for the next 6-year time period and discuss how we've established a balanced 6-year financial plan that's pragmatic and reflects the utilities needs. First off, the water sewer fund is an enterprise fund and not part of the city's general fund. What this really means is that as an enterprise fund, the city must adhere to certain key principles for enterprise funds, namely that the water and sewer fund should be self-sufficient and not require support from the general fund. And second, the revenue from the utility must remain dedicated to the utility and it can't be used for other non-utility needs. So this long-term financial plan that Public Works updates on an annual basis is really important in understanding where the utility is and where it's going so that it remains financially resilient. The financial planning effort for the enterprise fund provides an indication of the overall financial adequacy. In other words, it answers the question as to whether the user charge revenues are sufficient to recover all of the utilities costs. The evaluation of the cost of service then makes sure that the rates are reasonably aligned and more importantly, that the level of revenue from the rates is reasonably aligned with the cost of providing service. And then finally, with rate design, we are evaluating to make sure that the rates provide sufficient revenue stability, but that they're also easy to understand and to understand the extent to which rate increases may pose an impact on customer affordability and how to address that. And then on the next, yes.
Ms. Lemoyne, there's a question from Councilmember McCoy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So my question is, as you were speaking and you talked about how we were basically trying to get to a place of basically self-sufficiency where they were able to not have to go to the general fund. When will we get to that point? Because I actually remember coming in first term and still having the same type of presentation put before us, and it feels as though it's always being pushed out further and further.
So the utility is self-sufficient right now. It does not rely on any general fund monies. Where we haven't been able to move from is from that stability phase to the next stage, which is the resilience phase of having greater reserves, more cash finance capital, some of the elements and that would really help further strengthen the utility for unforeseen events. The utility has done a very good job in the city by adopting, we'll talk a little bit more soon about the operating reserve fund and the rate stabilization reserve fund. Those have been very positive and really, frankly, between the pandemic, tornadoes and things of that sort that really have impacted the utility. The utility's been able to withstand all of that because of the planning that's been taken into consideration as we move forward. However, as those sorts of events happen, that does tend to kind of take a step back on where we are. Also in fiscal 21, we didn't have a rate increase. And so that also then kind of puts a pause on that forward progression towards that resiliency phase. But the utility is self-sufficient at this time.
Maybe to just add, Councilwoman McCoy, good evening. In addition to not only being self-sufficient, actually during fiscal year 2010 through 2015, the utility actually returned, the water sewer fund returned $15 million back to the general fund for past borrowing from the general fund. So it's not only self-sufficient now in terms of meeting the minimum standards, but has also done the repayment to the general fund as well.
Okay, thank you for adding that. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, Ms. Lemoyne, I believe we're back to you.
Sounds great. So the financial plan that we'll be talking about this evening consists of two parts, the revenues and the expenses. On the expense side, Public Works manages and minimizes the cost of capital improvements, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this, but by developing a schedule of projects, prioritizing those projects, and scheduling them to manage the annual total level of expenditure to the extent possible. And that helps mitigate the need for significant rate increases in a particular year and that sort of thing. It also, as has been discussed tonight, coordinating with other projects to help minimize costs. In addition, Public Works has been leveraging low interest loans through the State Revolving Fund program as much as possible, and that helps keep interest rates and interest costs as low as possible. Public Works also manages operating expenses carefully. Over the last 3 years, the utility has only expended about 98% of the budget. So the financial plan that we're discussing tonight reflects that continuing as well. On the revenue side, whereas in past years, the utilities was experiencing declining volume, which has been very consistent across the United States due to a variety of different factors, but that has an impact on revenues. But more recently, consumption seems to have leveled off. And so the financial plan that we're reflecting here for this 6-year study period assumes steady consumption over the study period. The city's also undertaken an extensive collection effort, and that helps ratepayers overall by reducing delinquencies and bringing that revenue back into the utility. And then finally, we've projected the use of the rate stabilization reserve to manage annual and cumulative impact on rates. Next slide. This graphic summarizes the 6-year CIP. It totals about $176 million over the 6-year time period. As I mentioned before, the city really strives to levelize the total annual capital spending to the extent possible. And you can see that is in this graphic is fairly levelized. However, due to the size or the timing of certain projects, it can cause a bit of a bump, as you can see in particular in fiscal 2024. But for the most part, the program is a pretty steady state of spending. The other key point is that while over the past several years, the focus was more on the water side, completing several important projects that were prioritized and completed. As that work is concluding and the water utility CIP moving to more of a maintenance phase and that ongoing system replacement that's needed, the focus now is more on the sewer side, with more investment over the study period for improvements at the treatment plant and throughout the system. Next slide. On the operating side, the financial plan does include an escalation of costs for operation and maintenance expenses. It's around 2.5% per year, and that's shown in the upper left hand corner of the graphic. Right below it then is a comparison of historical CPI for water and sewer maintenance costs. And as you can see, that has been declining. Then this is a US CPI metric for water and wastewater maintenance. It's declined, but as you can see by the graphic, the 2.5% that we're projecting for the city actually is remaining below even the most recent 2020 level for that CPI. And as I mentioned earlier, the financial plan also reflects operating expenses at 98% of the budget. And then on the right-hand side, we show a graphic of the percent change in debt service costs. That is a little bit more lumpy, if you will, because the principal and interest on bonds and loans hit at different times, particularly for the SRF loans, the state revolving fund loans. The principal and interest on those become due at the time in which the project is complete. It helps the utility by deferring the repayment of that until the project is complete. But that does then cause a little bit more lumpiness as far as when you look at it from a percentage increase standpoint. For example, the loans related to the South Wilmington Wetlands Project is scheduled to begin in 2024, so you can see an increase in that. And then in 2025, the electrical upgrades at the treatment plant are expected to begin. So what does all of this mean when we bring it together? The bulk of the utility costs continue to be O&M, as you can see in the blue portion of the bar chart shown on this graphic. This includes all of the personnel costs, the fleet, and so on that is mostly of a fixed nature for water and wastewater utilities. Next in the gray, you can see the projected debt service. Each year, as I indicated, the debt service increases, some as more loans and the repayment on those loans come online. We are also projecting a very modest amount of cash financed capital. As Kelly talked about earlier in the presentation, we really do strive for utilities to have a portion of the capital program cash financed due to the factors of coming out of pandemic and trying to prepare a financial plan that is pragmatic for where we are right now. We don't have a lot of cash finance capital in this financial plan, but we do have $13 million over the study period. The O&M reserve requirement then is shown in green. That is the 17% of the following year budget that is required to have as a reserve. So that is included as well. And everything is then balanced out by drawing on the rate stabilization reserve. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide, but in the yellow across the bottom of the graphic, you can see the debt service reserve, or the rate stabilization reserve balance. Next slide. So let's take a look at this a little bit further, at the numbers themselves. Lines 1 and 2 show the indicated revenue increases. The first line is water and sewer. The second is stormwater. In 2022, we are projecting a 3% revenue increase for water and sewer and a 2% increase for stormwater. And that is providing for $83.3 million in revenue in 2022, as you can see on line 3. That revenue has to support all of the O&M expenses and debt service for 2022. As you can see on line 6, then there's no money available in 2022 for any cash financed capital at those revenue increases. In fact, as you can see on line 7 for 2022, $2.9 million is projected to be needed from the rate stabilization reserve to cover all of the costs while keeping rates a bit lower this next year as we're coming out of the pandemic. In 2023 through 2027, we're projecting a 5.35% annual revenue increases for water and sewer. And for stormwater, we're projecting a 2% increase in 2023, followed by 6% annual increases in 2024, 2025, and 2026, with total revenues by 2027 coming in at just under $103 million. The future year increases are needed to cover the O&M costs, which increased to just over $71 million by 2027. That's shown in line 4. And then on line 5, debt service increases incrementally over the study period as well to $28.4 million in 2027. And as I mentioned before, on line 6, we have been able to provide for a modest amount of cash financing over the study period. Line 7 summarizes the use of the rate stabilization reserve. You can see that we utilize some of the money from the rate stabilization reserve to allow for a leveling of the revenue increases. That helps moderate impact to customers when we're looking at year-to-year change in revenues and rates. We draw from the rate stabilization reserve in 2021 and 22. In 2024, we're actually able to put just a little bit of dollars back, and then drawing further from it again in 25 and 26. The key thing to note again is that based on the 22 budget for O&M and CIP and assumptions that we've made regarding capital financing. The plan calls for mostly debt financing of the capital program at these revenue increases and the use of a substantial portion of the rate stabilization reserve. I see a question.
Yes, Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. Yes, on your rent stabilization account, I think the department has used a very humanitarian rule during this pandemic on turning people's water off. And that's, that bill's going to have to be paid at some point. And I imagine there are going to be a fair amount of folks out there who still won't be able to pay their water bill. And I'm assuming that's where some of these funds come from. Is that a good assumption or a bad assumption?
Actually, Brett can speak to that. There's a specific line in which comes from the CARES Act, in which there is a debt relief fund.
Right, there is. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was going to be eligible for that. So I'm not uncomfortable asking him for those numbers. So you're off the hook. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe Brett is on though.
I am.
Oh.
So
What were you trying to
I'm gonna
avoid
put
the
him on
answer?
the spot.
Yes, we've actually instituted a utility relief fund. And right now we have $285,000 available. It's at, now there's some income requirements, and at my last budget hearing, we discussed with this committee the possibility of increasing the amount of eligibility, which is now 165% of poverty. For a family of four, that is approximately $42,000. We may need to increase that to get a lot more participation, but it is there. The other thing that we've been emphasizing, at least since I've been here, is that please, anybody who has trouble, simply call us. We have very generous payment agreements. We can help negotiate through some of these delinquent accounts. In some cases, we may alleviate penalties and interest. The important thing is for people to call and engage with us. We think it's very important that we make sure we keep people's water on and that we lower the amount of delinquencies that are out there.
Okay, thank you for that answer. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I believe Councilmember Gray, she has a question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is that we had a lot of bad debt water bills unpaid prior to COVID. And what is the difference percentage-wise with COVID bad debt? What was the difference between the bad debt pre-COVID and what we've received or what we've acquired during COVID, like 2020?
I can go ahead and answer that. We've seen a slight increase in the amount of delinquencies coming in with COVID. However, it was a lot less than we thought was going to happen. And that is primarily because, at least we think that the stimulus programs that had been offered during the last year and the unemployment increases to the unemployment insurance has helped bolster that. And that was really kind of a blessing for us. I will tell you that the bulk of the delinquent accounts have been longstanding. And, we continue to reach out to those individuals that have had those longstanding increases. A majority of people do pay on time, but those that are chronic in terms of the delinquencies, they've been out there for quite some time.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
The program we have that certain income people can apply to pay their water bill. Is it true? I think I heard in another budget here, only 41 people have applied for that program in the past year or so.
Well, the program has only been available since the beginning of February.
Okay.
Because we never had a corpus of money available to do this until we allocated money from the CARES Act.
Right.
So 41 people have applied since February. However, I was just off, this is a subject that I talk about with our accounts services staff every week. This week we got another 5 requests in for the utility payment program. We're putting it out on WITN at your request, as your suggestion. So we're teeing that up, and we're doing a digital program that is pushing messages to people's mobile phones, asking them to call into the city. But again, we have $285,000 available for those of you who want to come in and take advantage of it. Now, I will tell you, we have gotten, one of the things we need to do is we need to clarify the program. A lot of people are calling in because we call it the Utility Relief Program. A lot of people have been calling in asking if we would pay their Comcast bill, their telephone bill, and the like. That is not the case. This is for water and sewer utility payments with the city. But that money is out there, and we encourage you to call.
Thank you very much. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Council Member Cabrera, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Taylor, for that information. And I'm glad that you took the suggestions of council and we're pushing forward to let people know about that. My question will piggyback on Council Member Gray. So we talked about the percentage of people that owed, the outstanding balances versus COVID. Let me ask you this, businesses. Do we have businesses that have outstanding water bills that just, they just kind of like scofflaws, they just don't pay them? Is there a ratio of businesses that haven't been able to pay their water bill? And would those businesses be entitled to the CARES Act? Well, actually, no, because you have that income. Would any private business be allowed to get any additional resources? And what is the percentage of businesses that owe us money, if you have that handy?
I don't have the percentage handy, but I can tell you from my experience, most businesses do pay their water bills on time. I will say that there are a number of chronic payers. There are some nuances with it that we're still trying to work out. For instance, apartment buildings and condos, in some cases, have larger delinquencies than usual. Anybody who has stormwater charges, we've been seeing a lot of delinquencies with that in respect to that. But the commercial entities have not been too delinquent. I will also tell you that there are a number of landlords that are out there that have large balances as well. Now, with respect to dealing with commercial entities, including landlords, again, our posture is call us. We will work out, and we have worked out, payment agreements with larger commercial entities to help stabilize. And, our most important objective is to get people caught up and to be able to get that delinquent amount of money, particularly the principal, into the water fund in order to sustain it. We will work out payment agreements with commercial entities if they are behind. So again, we're not trying to dissuade anybody from coming in. We have negotiated settlements with respect to the water portion of the utility bill. Not much we can do in terms of stormwater because that is a very specific legislated charge that's out there. But for the water portion, water and sewer portion, we can go ahead and have a negotiation.
Thank you, Director.
And Councilmember McCoy, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Director Taylor, just wanted to find out whether or not the utility relief was that that program offered only to Wilmingtonians, since we actually do service some of Newcastle County. Was this a Wilmingtonian only program?
My understanding is that it is for Wilmingtonians only. I think I will have to double check that and see what we had included in the rules. But you know, if the law would allow us, we would allow outside county. I wouldn't mind having outside county customers also participate. But I will double check that.
Okay, may I follow up?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I guess it's more so about the Newcastle County portion also as well. Do we have any idea how much? I guess it's more so about the increases when it comes to Newcastle County and the city of Wilmington, and whether or not will we still see increases in revenue more so than the county? Like, just trying to make certain that things even out. I'm looking at the year 2027. Are they really going to increase the revenues by 28% to the water sewer and 22% to the stormwater by 2027? Is that what I'm looking at right now? I'm just trying to make certain I'm reading this correctly.
Mm-hmm. I believe there's a slide in this presentation that talks about the difference between the inside the city and outside the city impacts of the increase of 3% and the 2%. So I'll hold off on that, answering that question until we get to that slide.
Yes, that is correct. We do have the third section of this presentation. We will talk about the rate and the rate impact for both inside and outside city.
Then I'll wait for that slide. Thank you.
All right. Leave Ms. Lemoyne. I believe we're back to you.
I see a hand still up. Is that an older hand?
Oh, I can't. Sorry.
No, that's me. May I speak, Chair?
Okay. Yes, Councilmember.
Another piggyback. No worries. Another piggyback question. So when we're talking about residents of the county that still utilize the city services, and that fund, which is from the CARES Act money, you know, Wilmington did not get the same amount that the county did. So the monies that we received from the CARES Act was specifically, I guess, Wilmington specific. So I guess, Director Taylor, the question would be, would the residents of the county qualify to access the CARES Act money that the city received to help them with their bills, being that it's a Wilmington utility, or would they apply for the county's CARES Act money to help them with the utility, even though it is Wilmington that provides it? That's just the comment I want to make in terms of looking at that, because fair is fair. We didn't get as much as the county, and if they qualify to get that assistance, they shouldn't have to tap into our assistance. It should be exclusively for Wilmington. But again, you're going to look into that. I'd like to know what the results of that are as well. Thank you.
I am council member. I was looking at the program, and this utility assistance program is for city residents only. I'm unsure whether or not Newcastle County is providing CARES Act money for such a utility program. But it's something that, you know, again, if there was demand out there, we would consider it. However, I do take your comment to heart in saying that, yes, Newcastle County did receive a pretty substantial portion of CARES Act money. We're using the CARES Act money that the Newcastle County gave to us for that portion. So, you know, our funds are limited.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yeah.
as you recall, we did get allocation for COVID out of the CDBG, and those funds went to nonprofit agencies that can assist with utilities, rental assistance, utilities, all of those types of things. So I believe that Newcastle County received an increase in their CDBG funds as well. And I don't know if they dispersed their funds in the way that we did to nonprofits to help with that. But I think the nonprofits we did allocate to, they're not restricted to just City of Wilmington in all likelihood.
If I could just interject for a second, this might be a legal question. I don't know that the utility, it could be discriminatory, if you will, based on location. So I would probably defer the question to the law department, if you would. That's just my 2 cents. And we should probably take the conversation offline.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Appreciate it. I guess getting back on track. Ms. Lemoyne, can you take us through what this pie chart is and
yes,
what it means?
Yeah, first, can we go back to the previous slide? Just had a few things to discuss on the previous slide. The top half of the slide is the same table as we were just discussing, but the bottom half has some key performance indicators for the water and sewer study that we wanted to discuss. Per the city ordinance, as we've mentioned, there is an operating reserve requirement of 17% of the following year O&M expenditures. So the financial plan must provide for that sufficient revenues for that to be met. And line 8 is the end of year fund balance. But if you look at line 9 and 10, you can see the level of sufficiency for that operating reserve requirement. And we are meeting in each year of this study period, the 17% requirement. We also calculate debt service coverage, and debt service coverage is an index that is calculated by taking the total revenue less the operation and maintenance expenses, and that remaining revenue that's left over should be sufficient to support and pay for all of the debt service, principal and interest on all of the outstanding debt. If the remaining revenue is equal to debt service, the factor would be a 1.0. And you can see on line 11, in 2021 and 2022, that index is less than 1, which means that the annual revenues from current year rates are not projected to be sufficient to recover all of the costs. So we are projecting the use of the rate stabilization reserve in those years to provide the remaining funding needed to cover all of the expenses. 2020 is also then a tough year. We've set the rate increases, as we've discussed, at 3% for water and sewer and 2% for stormwater, really recognizing that we're coming out of the pandemic, a lot of economic concerns for a lot of the customers, but it does have an impact on revenues in that year. The reason 2023 and beyond indicate higher revenue increases is because it's important for the utility to get back to at least achieving the 1.0 debt service coverage and really exceeding that to get to an industry practice that's more like 1.2 times debt service coverage here in this building phase that we continue to be in. And that provides also revenue for the cash financing of a portion of the CIP. And as I mentioned earlier, even though we have a target for 20% cash financing, on line 12, you can see that we're really achieving less than 10% annual cash financing due to the fact that we're trying to keep revenue increases as low as possible during this time period. This is the financial plan that was presented to the Utility Citizen Advisory Board. And the UCAB did support the financial plan as was discussed earlier, sending their recommendation to the administration and city council.
Pam, if I may add here, one important point in this financial plan. So the financial plan, the reason we call it a financial plan is because it's not just sufficient to look at any 1 year. Now the rates are typically set and approved in the city. Historically, rates have been set for 1 year. But really any action in a given year, any action or inaction in a given year has a compounding effect on the following year. So the reason this is important is because the reason we are seeing this pressure in 2022 and even some of the years beyond 2022 is because it's important to note in 2021, there was no rate increase. But it's not like just because the city did not have a rate increase, it doesn't mean that the cost did not increase. There were O&M cost increases, there were debt service cost increases, but there was no increase in revenue to offset those increase in costs. So therefore, there's a withdrawal that comes in 2021 from the rate stabilization fund. And so any year you don't have that kind of a rate increase, it just puts a compounding pressure on the subsequent years. And that's really what you're seeing in the 2022 through 2027. Pam, back to you.
Sure, thanks. And I see a question.
Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you.
Oh,
okay, so so I'm glad that you got a chance to bring that to my attention. I do see the 3% and 2 for fiscal year 2022. The thing is, I'm like, I would like to see exactly if you're able to state what that increase would look like on an average bill. That if you're only basically using what is prescribed for your house or your building or whatever on a monthly basis, what would that look like? Because to see a 5.35% increase on an annual basis just looks a bit, I understand that we're trying to stabilize, but it just looks a little excessive.
So we do have
some in the subsequent slides. I think it's coming up.
Okay.
I'm not mistaken.
We do presenting for 2022. We don't have slides that present that impact for the future years. To Prabha's comment earlier, the city's historically increased rates a year at a time, but we do provide the 6-year plan so that we kind of know where we're headed and we know what the impact of decisions this year, what that impact is then on future years.
Okay. May I follow, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So, and I just also want to make certain that as we are looking at this, that we also incorporate whatever funds that are owed to us and contracts that are still not quite completed when it comes to outside sources needing the water. I'm hoping that type of information and those funds also, that revenue is also being taken into consideration, because I just feel like the city of Wilmington, that like they may start to have an issue with the increase if they're seeing that it's not happening elsewhere, like outside of the city.
Understood.
Mm-hmm. And just briefly before we move on to the what, which is the revenue, the bill impact and comparison with some of the surrounding communities, just wanted to summarize that again, this financial plan is leveraging all of the available funding. There are capital funds available from bond issuances and so forth that we are utilizing as part of this study period. We've modeled significant use of the rate stabilization reserve as we've discussed before, and you can see that in the table in the center here. We are drawing that down from just over $8 million to approximately $1.7 million by the end of the study period.
Pam, just a second, the slide has not moved. Next slide, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Prabha. So the leveraging of the fund balances that you can see across the top, the table in the center then is the withdrawal from the rate stabilization reserve fund, showing what that balance looks like year over year. So we do draw that down to about $1.7 million by the end of the study period. What that means is at the end of the day, we're trying to keep the revenue increases as low as possible by leveraging that rate stabilization reserve, retaining the 17% operating reserve. But by the time we reach 2028, if these projections hold over the study period, there really wouldn't be any significant rate stabilization reserve to draw down further, to hold rates down even further in the future. But as Prabha mentioned, that's why the 6-year plan is done on an annual basis, so that we can continually take into account new information and continue to update this plan on an annual basis.
To follow up, Ms. Lemoyne, kind of, I guess the big thing, and I know we don't know the answer yet, but what about an infrastructure plan, American Rescue Funds plan? Because what you're asking for us is to do a potentially unpopular move, raising water rates, but then we possibly could utilize American Rescue Funds to balance this out. I mean, do you have any insight? Because from my understanding, the money's supposed to be hit Wilmington, I believe, next week. So is there any insight into that?
So this plan does not anticipate the use of any of that for the capital program. If it is available, then certainly that would have a positive impact, essentially infusing additional cash financing and therefore further reducing either the low interest loans or GO bonds that are projected over the study period, but not knowing what may or may not be available. This plan does not include that. I would say it's more likely, as you can see from what we presented earlier, 2022 really isn't, the revenues aren't sufficient to recover the costs as they are. What would really benefit from the use of those funds would be in helping keep those 5.35% increases in the future years down a little bit more. But it really wouldn't have an impact, in my opinion, on the need for the 3% and the 2%.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah. And then again, if we could go back to the previous slide, then the pie chart shows us maximizing the low interest loans and the bonds. You can see the graphic showing the breakdown of the capital spending over the study period and the impact of that low interest loans. It really does help things out. But with that, I will turn the presentation over to Rupa Jha, who will discuss the final section of the presentation and the bill impact.
Thank you so much, Pam. Good evening, everyone. Could we go to the next slide, please? So continuing with the theme of why and how we come to what. So what is the impact on the ratepayers based on this financial plan, and what does it get us? Next slide, please. So in this section, we will cover the typical bill impact on a residential customer, both inside city and outside city, as well as we will talk about how the utility rates for Wilmington's water utilities compared to other neighboring utilities, as well as other utilities that a typical household uses. Next slide, please. So we talked about the water and sewer rates, 3% revenue adjustment, and the stormwater 2% revenue adjustment. So for an inside city customer, a typical household of 2 people with maybe a small child, they use typically about 4,000 gallons per month, and they have a small meter, like a 5/8" meter. So their water bill will go up about 95 cents. The sewer bill, which is based on the water consumption, will go up about 70 cents. And the stormwater for a small household, for a small single family home, will go up about 10 cents. So the total impact is about $1.75 on a monthly basis. So it is definitely, something that $1.75 is obviously affect some people's budget, but in terms of, in the light of the pandemic and in the light that last year there was no rate increase, the mayor decided to give a relief to the people. People were struggling this year to maintain the utilities' financial resilience and continue on the path of resilience. A small increase is being proposed. For the outside city, the city of Wilmington only provides the water service. The sewer collection service is provided by the county itself. So we don't know if the county will be proposing any rate increases. We haven't seen anything publicly available. So we are not showing any increase on the sewer, and county does not have a stormwater fee. The sewer and stormwater services provided by the city are just for inside city. On the water side, just for the water service that is provided by the city, based on the 3% increase, the county residents will see about $1.53.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I hate to cut across you, but this should answer Councilmember McCoy's question on the fiscal impact on a monthly basis for city residents. That's all.
You know, it does. Thank you so much, Chief of Staff.
Now, is there a follow-up?
I did have a follow-up. Thank you.
Yes,
just wanted to find out. Okay. All right, I'm sorry. I just wanted to find out whether or not we've actually taken a closer look, because more people are actually home and working, or like we went through that whole phase of being home and working, whether or not the water bills actually increased. Like these are kind of based off of no one being home probably most of the day. With that 4,000 gallons, have we seen a huge increase on the $4,000 consumption? So that was my last question.
So let me just help answer that. So this is when we say typical, this is not just an assumed 4,000 gallons. This is actually based on the historical consumption, the average consumption. We track the average consumption every year in light of doing the study. So as part of that consumption analysis, we've looked at literally what happened in fiscal 20, how did the consumption go up so far in 21, looking at all of that. The typical residential consumption, while it has gone up on a per capita basis, on a typical basis, it's still at the 4,000 level. The overall consumption has gone up because many people are staying home and stuff like that. But again, when you translate it to an average consumption per month, it has not gone up significantly because there are some inside city customers who actually left inside the city and went outside the city. So that's kind of some of the patterns we have seen in the consumption.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick follow-up to what Councilwoman McCoy asked. So what could be the highest amount that a constituent could pay for water, sewer, and stormwater? Because I know we're saying like typically that's the typical bill amount, but is there like one of the highest numbers we've seen as an increase on someone's bill versus someone who hardly uses it? I was just wondering if there was a higher number that they may see $2 versus $1.75. Those.
We could actually provide, Councilman Dixon, we could actually, if it would be helpful, we could actually send at a different levels of consumption. So when we say what is the highest, it really depends on the consumption. So if the consumption increases significantly, then the 95 cents that we are showing here per month, that will of course increase. And when the inside city, especially for an inside city customer, when their water consumption increases, then their sewer charge, the sewer impact of the 70 cents will also increase. Now, what will not change is that is really the 10 cents on the stormwater. For a typical mid-size kind of a home, that 10 cents will be 10 cents because that's not based on consumption. So what we could help is by sending pretty quickly this week, maybe different levels of consumption, 2-3 different levels of higher consumption, and what would the $1.75 look like when you increase the consumption levels? We could certainly send that, if that would be helpful.
That would be really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
We can move to the next slide. Thank
yes.
you. Right. So this slide presents the typical utility that a regular household uses and how their water bill, which is an essential utility, essential service, just like electric, gas, or even communication in this day and age, how it compares to those other essential utilities. And we can see that water, sewer, stormwater, which is very important for everybody's health, very important for quality of life, is at the lower end of the spectrum for all the other utilities that people use. And Wilmington's water quality is extremely high quality. It meets all regulatory standards, and unlike so bottled water, the Wilmington tap water is, for a gallon of water, costs less than a penny, and the daily cost of drinking water, very high quality drinking potable water, is only $1.09, and the wastewater disposable, and again Wilmington meets all the high quality standards. The water that's discharged to the river is very high quality, is only less than $1. So for $2 approximately, the whole household for a day does showering, use of toilet, dishwashing, cooking, so all the basic necessities of life. Next slide. So this slide compares the typical monthly water, sewer, and stormwater bill for Wilmington and its neighboring communities. So the Wilmington's rates are based on the proposed 3% increases for water, sewer, and 2% for stormwater. For the other utilities, some rates are proposed for fiscal year 22 that we were aware of if there was a rate filing. And in other cases where we don't know if their rates are going to be increased or not for FY22, we have the latest available rates shown here. So as we can see, the Wilmington inside monthly bill is at the lower end of the spectrum, even with the proposed rate increases. And Wilmington outside city is somewhere in the middle, although it is close to the investor-owned utilities like Artesian and also City of Philadelphia and some utilities in Pennsylvania. Next slide. So to bring this to a close, we would like to say that the City of Wilmington's water, sewer utilities have an obligation to meet regulatory compliance and ensure the community's health and safety, provide high quality water. And this utility does this by making sure its infrastructure is maintained, integrity is maintained. They have skilled workforce. They want to train and retain that skilled workforce. And while doing all this, we are also focused on doing this efficiently, cost effectively, and keeping the community engaged, talking about the impact on the community and making sure we can help out the community to have good water as much as possible. Next slide. So thank you again for your time. And if anybody has any additional questions, we'll be happy to answer them now. We'll turn it back.
Yes, we have Council Member Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is more about the quality than the price of the water. I read where the county was testing the sewage water for COVID. So I was wondering if we are testing the effluent water, clean water that we release into the river for COVID.
So the county is testing our plant. So they're testing us.
But isn't that the dirty water that they're testing? I'm asking, are we testing the clean water before we release it into the river?
I'm not sure I understand. All of our water is tested before, all the water at the wastewater treatment plant is tested before it's released into the river, always.
And it's tested for COVID also, because I know before it was found that COVID was in sewage and there had to be precautions taken special for workers around the dirty water. So what I'm asking is, once we clean it up, are we now testing it before we release it into the river?
Chriso, are you on the line?
Yes.
Brian Leonard. Oh, hi, Chris.
Hey.
Can you answer that question?
I'm not sure if it's tested specifically for COVID before.
I don't think it is. No. And I don't believe, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, I don't know if we can include that in our testing, but I know COVID is in sewage. That's the way they've been testing some colleges for kids who have who are positive for COVID. So it's been a way to test for COVID in environments. So I'm hope that we would add that test before we release the water. Well, someone can let me know what we can or will, or specifically what we're testing for. You can get back to me.
So I don't know that you would test for, we can talk about it offline. I don't know what the purpose would be for testing COVID that goes into once it's after it's treated.
Okay.
We can talk about it offline.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I believe Ms. Ja, the floor is yours again.
Yeah, this concludes our presentation. So if there are any other questions, we'll be happy to answer them. If not, I'll send it back to you, Chair.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much to the Black and Beach team. They've been working with the city for a long time, and we appreciate the insight. And also to UCAB for being engaged. And with this, I now turn it to the public to see if there's any questions or comments. Going once, going twice. All right, I'd then like to turn it back to council. Are there any final questions about the water rates specifically? All right, well, seeing none, I'd like to then turn it to you, Commissioner Williams, for any final closing statement or comments about the water fund, or whether someone from Black and Beach can do it.
No, I just, I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I know it's really dense. And like I said, it's taken me years to learn it and to get through it. So please, if you have any follow-up questions, let Marshall know. We'll go ahead and get the answers for you. You know, please get through it, look at it, and like I said, let me know if there's any questions. We hope that, you know, some funding comes our way, but you can never count on it. And you know, the money that we get will go towards the future, really. And we hope that you know, a 2% stormwater increase, a 3% water increase this year, and some money from the federal government will mean, you know, less increases in the future, because there always will be a need for infrastructure improvement. If we're replacing infrastructure at 1.5% a year, and the infrastructure lasts 100 years, then, you know, you can figure out that math. We'll be back here in, you know, in 80 years asking, you know, starting all over again, basically. As mentioned earlier in the evening, I was a participant in the press conference with Senator Carper, and that legislation is very, very good. I really hope that it passes the House. There's some really great programs in there, including an EPA pilot for low-income assistance, which I think would benefit the citizens of Wilmington greatly. There's not only loans in there, but there's a lot of grant money, and that's really what we're looking for from the federal government. I think that you know, the federal government is finally recognizing that it can't always just be on the local municipalities and their ratepayers to address these huge infrastructure issues. So if the federal government would just kick in some and help us out here, I think these conversations that we're having every night, not every night, every year would be so much easier if the federal government would just realize that it can't be on our backs, our citizens' backs, these huge mega infrastructure issues. Anyway, so that's my little soapbox. I appreciate you listening. And let's hope that it passes in the House, because I think there's some really good things in there for us, and that this conversation next year will look much, much different. So have a great evening, and thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Now, there is, I don't know how WITN alerted us, there was one comment from a member of the public. So we were going to go back to the public, and I know it's out of order, but I believe there's Miss Christian Willauer.
Oh, thank you very much, Councilman and Council and Commissioner Williams, for your team's presentation. And I really appreciate, can everybody hear me? Am I on?
Yeah.
I really appreciated your last comment about how these major infrastructure projects just are like, can't be sustained by, you know, local ratepayers. Because if you do look at the city of Wilmington, there are a lot of people, including homeowners and renters, whose housing costs are more than 30% of their rent. And there's important, just to say again, my name's Christian Willauer. I'm coming to as a volunteer with the Homes Campaign. And the Homes Campaign is a group of residents who are working for housing justice in the city of Wilmington and housing stability and promoting strong neighborhoods and stable housing for Wilmington residents. So we wanted to bring up the issue of equity with the water bill increases and the proposal tonight, and to remind the public and council of the need to consider what impact will these rate increases have on residents who are going to be called on to pay them. And just in terms of rent increases, I added them up, and it looks like by 2027, the proposal for this plan would be a 28% increase in water sewer fees and another 22% increase in stormwater fees by 2027. So that's significant, and it's outpacing, you know, the rate of increase of people's wages, which means that they're paying a bigger portion of their budget to water. And for people who are cost burdened, who are already paying more than 30% or sometimes 50% of their income in housing costs, that can be really significant and impact their housing stability. And just in terms of equity, 62% of the Latino families that live in Wilmington and 60% of the Black families and 47% of the white families are paying more than 30% of their income for housing, which includes water bills. So we want to have a plan that is sustainable. We want to build sustainability for the water sewer fund and for the utility, but we also need a plan that is sustainable for Wilmington's residents. So I'm really happy to hear that the city of Wilmington, and especially I want to, you know, thank our congressional delegation and the president, Biden, who is leading with such a focus on equity. And I'm looking forward to and hoping that the city of Wilmington can take advantage of every opportunity to make sure that we're addressing equity and building solutions that work for the residents, as well as the sustainability of the utility. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Willauer, for engaging. And then would like to turn it back to you all, turn it back to our regular meeting, as now this hearing has come to a close. We had a lot of great information, a lot of, as Commissioner Williams said, a lot of heady information, but a lot of vital information. And so throughout these next few weeks, Council will be going over the budget process. And just thanks, I want to, of course, give a hats off to Office of Management and Budget, OMB, department heads, WITN, and of course, members of the public who have participated in this process as we, again, scrutinize the budget during these tough times. And before I make some final just housekeeping comments, I believe Council Member Cabrera has a few words or comments.
I'm so sorry to do this out of order. I just had one quick question. I didn't ask it in time, but are there any infrastructure projects that we might have in mind, or something that we could do, being that we are getting monies, the Recovery Act monies, which specify that have to be used for infrastructure, and of course it has to be independent once that money is used. But is there any project that you can think of that Wilmington should be looking at, where this influx of money could be helpful in us getting it done sooner than later? And that's it. Thank you.
So I can think of at least a half a dozen projects that are shovel ready, already designed and engineered and ready to go. But I'm not positive what the rules are with respect to the, the Recovery Act yet. So once, the mayor's office lets us know what those rules are and what the money is going to be spent on, I have at least 6 that can go tomorrow. Most of them water, sewer. So, and every capital project that I spend federal money on means it comes off the books of the water sewer fund money that you've seen in these presentations. So that means less debt service, like less borrowing that I have to do for the water sewer fund. So yeah, I mean, I say bring it on, really. And we're like I said, we're ready to go. They're already either in design or engineered. Vince and I have half a dozen, maybe 10, if you want to, ready to go. But I don't know what the money is actually allowed for. So we'll have to wait and see on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly, and thank you for the presentation, everyone, tonight. Excellent job.
All right. So again, I appreciate everyone participating in this process. So again, this concludes the water sewer fund projection overview. And I know it seems very fast, but we have come to the conclusion of all the budget hearings. They're now completed. It was a very hectic and very, again, trying process. Especially during these times and when we can't all see each other, but we somehow made it happen. Again, hats off to WITN, City Council staff, all department heads and everyone for making this process as fluid as possible. And hopefully next year we'll be back in person. We'll get to see each other soon. So with that, I'd like everyone to know there is a Finance Committee meeting scheduled for Monday, May 17th. At 5 p.m. for discussion of all the budget in total and any amendments to the budget. Some of the key themes of the budget hearing: public safety, gun violence prevention programming, parks, education, neighborhood beautification, and neighborhood stabilization will be topics we will discuss. And this will be moving towards getting a finalized budget by May 30th. That is our mandate and that's our goal. So this will be the first of many sessions. So again, please tune in to WITN Channel 22 to watch the meeting. You can also watch online the budget debates at WITN22.org. And budget information, as always, is available on the new website, WILMDEBudget.org. And with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
It's been so moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Well, that concludes our meeting. And again, I look forward to seeing everyone next week for the committee hearing. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Be safe and well.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you, staff and chair.